This video explores and explains the operation of Schedule 5 of the Broadcasting Services Act. It further investigates what is required of relevant service providers when content is established as being prohibited under Schedule 5. To sufficiently analyse the required statement, this video will be split into three parts: an explanation of Schedule 5 of the Broadcasting Services Act, an analysis of prohibited or potentially prohibited content under the Australian Communications and Media Authority, and the requirement of internet service providers where such content is found. Schedule 5 of the Broadcasting Services Act outlines provisions in relation to content which is located outside of Australia. In order for a complaint to be made, the content needs to be in relation to prohibited or potentially prohibited content, which is provided for in Schedule 7 of the Act. Schedules 5 and 7 operate in close conjunction with one another and broadly place constraints on the type of online content that can be hosted by internet service providers. Prohibited content which is hosted overseas is only that which would be refused classification or classified X18+ by the Office of Film and Literature Classification. Where there is a complaint made under Schedule 5 of the Act, the Australian Communications and Media Authority investigates such a complaint, with reference to relevant classification codes outlined by the Australian Classification Board. Content is potentially prohibited content if it has not been classified by the Board, and if it were to be classified, there is a substantial likelihood that it would be prohibited content. Where prohibited or potentially prohibited content is hosted outside of Australia, the Australian Communications and Media Authority notifies filter software makers accredited by the internet industry in accordance with codes of practice in place under Schedule 5. The filters are made available by internet service providers to their customers for free or on a cost recovery basis. Where prohibited or potentially prohibited content is hosted overseas, it is also considered to be sufficiently serious. The Australian Communications and Media Authority notifies the member hotline in the country where the content appears to be hosted. Furthermore, where there is a sufficiently serious complaint, it may be handed over to the Australian Police, though this is dependent upon how serious the content of the website is and whether anybody specifically from Australia was named. For example, such material might be that which contravenes the State Crimes Act, such as child pornography, or matter instructive in the commission of a crime. If a code or standard is present in relation to the content, the Australian Communications and Media Authority can notify the internet service about the content and how it is to be treated under the scheme. Both prohibited and potentially prohibited content is provided for under the Internet Industry Code of Practice. If there is no relevant industry code, the Australian Communications and Media Authority can give notice to internet service providers to take reasonable steps to prevent access. If the Australian Communications and Media Authority forms the view that content complained of is or would be classified RC or X18+, the Australian Communications and Media Authority must notify suppliers of scheduled filters and internet service providers of the location of the content. Notification occurs directly, usually through email, and outlines to the internet service provider that a family-friendly filter has been made available, and that such a filter must be made available to all end users. After such notification, industry code requires internet service providers to make available a filter to their customers. This, however, does not include content which is classified as R18+. Internet service providers are not required to filter or attempt to block access to content, and Australian internet users are not under any legal or other obligation to receive or use the blocking and filtering software.
Created using Powtoon.